Welcome. In front of me is a Redmi Note 12 Pro, and today I'll show you an unboxing along with a quick overview. So anyway, let's just get straight into it. Okay, so there we go, that's the phone. Now quickly going into the screen, which you should be able to see in its full glory in a second. This is a OLED display, 120Hz refresh rate, Dolby Vision, HDR10+, a peak brightness of 900 nits, and the size of it is at 6.67 inch with a resolution of 1080 by 2400. Now I would say that normally this display is just basically the standard for like higher end models, but we actually have an OLED display, which is a little bit more than what you would normally get. Usually you get an AMOLED instead of OLED, so this is actually nicer. Now at the front we have a corner Gorilla Glass 5 as a protection, and at the back we have also some glass. I'm not sure if this is Gorilla Glass 5, it doesn't really state it, but unfortunately the frame is plastic, so that's a little bit of a bummer. Now moving on to the internals of this device. Let's actually just get to finish the setup. So the internals, there's a couple of versions of this device. The very like base version of it, you can get it with 128 gigs of storage and 6 gigs of RAM, but you can also get 128 with 8 gigs, 256 with 8, or 256 with 12 gigs of RAM. Unfortunately, all these storage types, no matter how fast or how big you go with, they cap at UFS 2.2 storage, so you're not even getting that UFS 3.1. I believe nowadays we even have UFS 4, if I remember correctly. Let me just quickly check, just so I am thinking correctly. So, yeah, so the newest flagships right now are running UFS 4.0. The previous flagships were running 3.1, I believe it was. And this is 2.2. Now what this actually means is the storage that is here, it's basically defining how fast it can read and write data onto it. So with 2.2 you're basically looking at like what usually mid-range devices come with, which is a little bit of a bummer considering this is technically what they consider, I guess, a flagship, though the price is on a lower obviously end. It's so obviously I just got a glance at the price, and this device comes at $370. That is a damn good deal for such a device. Now, in this case, I will be honest, I am willing to overlook the type of storage that is included in here, just because the display right here is pretty good, and the processor is also nothing like super good, but it's basically right at the top there. It's a little bit behind, but it's still in the race, I would say. So continuing on. So just to clarify, the processor right here powering this device is a Dimensity 1080. Now if you're wondering how powerful this is, it's basically equivalent to a Snapdragon, I believe it was 865. I think that was it. It's a little bit, actually no, I think it was even faster than that. I think it was between Gen 1 and Gen 2. Yeah, that's right. So yeah, this processor is basically somewhere in between Gen 1 and Gen 2. It's still struggling, a little bit slower than Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 in certain cases, but for the most part, from the like benchmarks that I've looked at, it basically performs as well as Gen 1, if not better in certain cases, while it's obviously slower than Gen 2 Snapdragon 8. And I think it's still slower than Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 Plus. So, like I said, it's somewhere in between there. But nonetheless, the processor right here, really good processor. especially for the price of this device. This is basically a flagship processor, just from not Snapdragon, so Qualcomm, I believe. Now, moving a little bit further down the list, we have a 5000 mAh battery, a really good 67 watt charger, so that will top your device up really quickly and nicely. And their advertised charging speeds, we are looking at 50% in 15 minutes and 100% of the charge in 46 minutes. So obviously, charging here is just fantastic. Now, moving on to cameras. At the back, we have a triple camera setup, though I'll be completely honest, this is a little bit of a drawback right here because they decided to include a shit camera. So we have a 15 megapixel f1.9 wide sensor, then we got an 8 megapixel f2.2 ultra wide, and then we got the shit camera, the 2 megapixel macro. Now the reason I'm calling this just garbage is because the 2 megapixel macro has no way in hell to produce better photos than the 50 megapixel wide sensor at like 2 times zoom, as an example. The 50 megapixel with 2 times zoom will still be sharper even though it's zoomed in, still will have a higher resolution photo, will have more light that has entered the sensor, so the image will look sharper, it will be less grainy, and in general just better in every way. So this little sensor right here, which I presume is the 2 megapixel, you could just, I don't know, take a sticker, stick it up, and don't ever use it because it's absolutely useless. And I keep saying this, but it's time to effing stop including this shit on your phones. The phone doesn't look any better because you have 3 cameras, like no one gives a shit, to be honest. What we care is to get quality for our money, and this right here is not it. Okay, so at the front we have another camera, as you'd obviously expect, and this is a 16 megapixel wide sensor. Now when it comes down to video footage with these cameras, at the front you can capture a 1080p 60 max, so you can get 1080, 30 or 60 frames, and with the back cameras you can capture 4K at 30 and 1080p at 30 and 60 plus slow motion at 120 and slow motion at 960, but that's by dropping it to 720p resolution. Now, then touching upon just a couple things that I didn't yet. We have a fingerprint sensor on the side, volume rockers. At the top, we have a headphone jack, which is a rarity right now. We have an IR blaster next to it, so you can use this device as a remote control for things like your AC units, TV boxes, and so on. Speaker grills, microphone, and then at the bottom we have another speaker grill, charging port, microphone, and let me just quickly get to this. There we go. Oh boy, that's, come on. It's literally bending out of shape, so I'm gonna grab something a little bit more rigid. There we go. Now, unfortunately, the SIM tray right here only takes 2 SIM cards and no SD card, which a little bit of a bummer. But like I said, the price of this device more than makes up for majority of the drawbacks, or all the drawbacks that this phone might come with. So there we go. Now, one last thing that I didn't mention is build quality right here. So I did mention that we have glass back and front, but frame plasticky. So a little bit of a bummer here. But just to kind of finish this off and give you the pros and cons of this device, I will say there will be plenty more pros over the cons. So big battery, really fantastic display right here, 120 Hz OLED display, so good. Just to, there we go, I'm gonna unlock it. So yeah, the display fantastic. It's running with a really good processor, so that's another pro. Has a headphone jack, though probably at this point not very many people care for it, but for the people that do, it's here, so that's a positive. It's always nice to have things that you might not need to use it, but still have them, rather than not have them and need them. And the charging for this device that comes in the box, again, fantastic. Obviously it also comes in the box, which already in itself is a feat for some manufacturers like Samsung. So there we go. Now the cons would be the build quality right here. We have a plastic frame, so the phone won't be as rigid And there was one more thing that I wanted to mention. The 2 megapixel camera is just a useless sensor right here that we have to pay for, but it's just meh. Like, we will never, none of us will ever use this sensor. It's bad. So that's another con. And I think honestly that's about all I have for cons, to be honest. This phone is really well rounded. Actually, one more thing. It's running Android 12, and I believe right now the newest one is Android 13, so it would be a little bit behind, but I might be wrong about that one. I know that Pixel for certain is using Android 13, so in this case, if we already are on Android 13, then this phone is a little bit behind. But possibly, it's gonna get possibly an upgrade to 13 anyway, once it rolls out to this device. But yeah, anyway, just finishing this off, really good device, especially for the price. It's a fantastic phone, pretty powerful, will get anything done that you throw at it. And the only like downsides here are super minuscule. So yeah, I didn't mention one more thing, the storage type right here being the UFS 2.2. It's on the slower side, so if you're planning to record at 4K 30 frames, it might take you a little bit longer. That is not the fault of your processor that is on this device. That is plenty fast. It will be the fault of the storage where it needs to read and write onto it. So that will be another con. But still, most of this phone is, in my book, a positive. So yeah, it's a really nice device in general for a very competitive price. So with this being said, if you found this video helpful, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and thanks for watching.